Hi, I'm Eric Westrich, and we're here at San Diego Startup Week, and we're also here with Julio de Unamuno, who is the CEO of Lab Fellows.
Hi.
Thank you. Welcome.
Pleasure being here.
You're heavily involved in this Startup Week. You're helping run sessions, do that, the new BioTech track. How did you get started in startups at all? Where'd that come from?
Yeah, well, it wasn't really planned. You just kind of get thrown in there. My whole background in biochemistry tracked the life cycle of putting a drug from the lab to market. And in doing that, and that taking 20 years, you get to a point in your career where you're just like, gosh darn, how are these guys on Kickstarter getting funded within hours, right? 45 new Kickstarter companies were funded last week, yet 45 new drugs barely came on the market all of 2015. So you just kind of think, as a father of three and a wife and kids and mothers and all that, we must do better in the biotech and pharmaceutical industry to try and bring more cures to market. And so, what do you got to do if you really want to make an impact? Just do it, right? And so we did that with Lab Fellows a few years ago and started, from a sharing economy approach of efficiency. How can we help biotech startups be more efficient and do better faster? That's kind of how we got started in Lab Fellows, is taking a look at the industry and figuring out how we can make an impact.
So basically, you're helping companies get the strategy and tactics right to start, launch, and grow and run?
Yeah, exactly. You can imagine with a tech company, your weapon of choice is a keyboard. In biotech, you're talking about a multi-million-dollar lab where you're growing things, you're blowing things up, right? You're trying to really figure out, how can I develop my product? And the only problem is, instead of a $19.99 a month internet connection, you're literally working with $1 million lab. And so we really want to try and build in ready access to that infrastructure and build a foundation that helps startups be more efficient, which means instead of spending $1 million of the $3 million from their investors on securing lab space and equipment, they can pour that into attracting the best scientists and the best people to really get their startup going.
So now that you've got companies that you're helping, what's your biggest challenge? What's the biggest challenge somebody's dumped in your lap and said, Julio, solve this problem for me?
Every challenge. So in dealing with biotech startups, I think the biggest challenge working with a lot of them is helping them focus. So coming out of the lab, a lot of us have been trained of doing science projects. And building a startup isn't a project, it's got to be focused and it's got to be executionary focused. And so our biggest problem is helping our startups just focus on, hey, I'm staring at the bench trying to cure cancer. The last thing I need is to call my equipment vendor because it's down, have my chief scientific officer, dial up the vendor to order more chemicals and reagents. And so it's that brain space, that creativity that's really rare for any entrepreneur in any company. And so our biggest challenge is doing and taking care of all the things that pull them away from the bench, being able to focus on really discovering the next cure for cancer, the next cancer moonshot.
So with all your customers, what do you feel is the best thing anyone's ever said? That thing that makes you happiest or proud?
That's a great question. What's made, let me think about that. I have some dead air time.
Well, who's your best customer?
Yeah. Our best customer is actually, so what makes me proud, our best customer is actually this one scientist, and he is on a mission to do whatever is necessary to get his company going. So we have a lab set up that they can clock in, clock out, it's secure. And we go and we look at the log files. Last night, yesterday, the guy came in at 10 a.m. and then punched out at 6 a.m. this morning. And that's what I'm proud of. I'm proud of seeing these scientists that if you actually eliminate the stumbling block of, hey, here's the infrastructure is not a problem, seeing them just totally take advantage of it and just cranking out, which that makes me the most proudest is, hey, if we can give you a solution where finding a lab isn't a problem and you can work on what you're doing, and he's developing what I think is going to be an amazing new technology we're going to hear about in the next 6 months. It's going to get funding, it's going to be famous and all that. But just knowing that that's starting in our lab, that we're providing kind of a fertile soil for these kinds of startups to develop, that's what gets me really excited.
And where do you see that going in the future? With all this going on, with the technology changing, what's going to happen the next 1 to 3 years in what you're doing?
Yeah, well, we see a future on the long term where biotech companies, we see a future where no one owns the lab, right? And so when you remove that and allow the scientists to just focus on developing that drug and getting it to market, we see a lot of opportunities, right? So in biotech, we're typically thinking about the 20 years it takes and the billions of dollars to make a new drug. And what we see and what gets us exciting is there's all these new applications that only take a few years. In 3 years, some of the projects that we see are folks working in microbiome, where they're actually changing the bacteria that are colonizing your underarms to smell like bananas. So you're not getting deodorant anymore. There's amazing applications. We're working with a bar owner out in Santa Monica. Knockoff vodka is a huge issue for him. And he's developing a spectrophotometer. It's like a little dongle for your iPhone that can look and say, hey, what's the real vodka versus the knockoffs? We got another company who's doing a similar application, but they're looking at pesticides and trying to develop a detector that can actually shoot the lettuce leaf out in Whole Foods and find out if you're really giving your kids organic food or not. And these are what are called really consumer biotech applications. These are things that can touch the market in the matter of years.
So the future looks like verifying my organic produce, making sure my vodka is good, and making my armpits smell like bananas. That's a bright future and very interesting. One last question for you. You're obviously put in a lot of time setting up, sponsoring, helping with Startup Week. How does Lab Fellows use Startup Week to achieve your goals?
Well, the way we see Startup Week and why we became a sponsor is really because our missions are aligned. We're trying to help early stage companies just launch, right? Just do it. And for us getting involved in this year, the first BioTech track, they've been operating for over 4 years now. And this is the first year they actually have reached out to another ecosystem, right? The biotech ecosystem. And so we're excited in getting involved in how can we facilitate cross-fertilization so that there can be learnings passed on between ecosystems, right? And I think on the biotech side, because of stress of intellectual property over the actual execution piece of starting a company, one of the things we hope that gets out of this week is that it's more about just getting it done than it is about having the greatest idea. If it were about the greatest idea, universities would be self-sustainable. They've got tons of patents and intellectual property. They'd be gold right now, right? Printing and minting out money. They wouldn't need grants. They wouldn't need federal government. But it turns out that's actually not the secret. The secret is doing it, right? And so what we hope comes out of this week and what we've seen over the last few days of the biotech track is a lot of scientists looking at this third option, right? You don't have to just stay in academia, and you don't have to work for big pharma. You can actually, in the economy is set up right now where it's actually the best time for trained scientists, trained biologists or chemists to just start a company and change the world that way.
Well, fantastic. Thanks for your time. Thanks for being here. Thanks for sponsoring Startup Week, and thanks for being here at San Diego Startup Week and Evo Nexus, and thank you for watching.
Thank you very much.